Bright Tuty. Every student matters.
Now, who are food insecure? Why do we learn about food security? Why do we learn that the quantity and quality of the food should be sufficient for everybody for a long term basis? Why do we say that? Why do we say that it has to be both accessible and affordable? Why do we say that? Is there anybody who cannot access it? Is there anybody who cannot afford it? Is there anybody who cannot have sufficient amount of food grains? Those people who cannot afford, who cannot access it, who cannot have sufficient quantity of food grains, those are people who are food insecure. Okay, so in India, a large section of people suffer from food and nutrition insecurity. People are not food secure. Large group of people, large communities of people in India are so poor that they cannot afford to buy food, they cannot afford to consume the basic necessity of nutrition that they require. Okay, so those people are food insecure. They have nutrition insecurity. Alright. Now, who are these people? The worst affected people are landless laborers, okay, people who have no land but work in the fields, work in the land cultivated, and people who have nothing to depend upon, like beggars, right, rickshaw pullers, etc. All these people, they have nothing to depend on, they have no property, they have no asset. Alright, they live on daily wages which are so less, 30 rupees per day, 100 rupees per day. What will you do with 100 rupees per day? Right? It's very difficult. So these people are the worst affected people and they are the most food insecure people in our country. So we have traditional artisans, people who are artisans who work in factories, who work in small cottage industries, but they have no money. They do not get money for the work they do, for the skill they have. Right? The self-employed workers, people who are self-employed, they have small businesses or they try to pull rickshaws or they try to drive autos. Right? They are self-employed, but they cannot make more money. They cannot make much or sufficient amount of money which can help in their sustenance. And beggars. So these are some of the people who are worst affected and who are food insecure. Now in the urban areas, there are people who belong to the low paid occupation group. People go to work, but not everybody are paid properly. Not everybody are paid highly, right? There are people who are paid very low. Like for example, the sweepers, right? In the cities, you see people sweeping the offices, sweeping the malls. They are not getting much. Okay, they're not getting paid well. People who work in the toilets, people who pick the garbages, right? All those people are in the low paid occupation group. Now these people are also worst affected. They are in poverty and they are food insecure. So here are some of the groups who are most food insecure. Who are they? They are people who have either little land, small piece of land, or very low land productivity. Okay, they have no productivity, no proper yield from their cultivation that they do. Example, the SCs, STs, the OBCs, the backward classes. Okay, in India we have a category where we put these groups of people. They are scheduled castes, scheduled tribes, OBCs or other backward classes. These are all backward classes and they have very low productivity or they have no control over land. They do not own land. Even if they own very small plots of land and they have nothing to depend on. Okay, these people are food insecure. Now, who are the other peoples? People who are affected by natural disasters. Say for example, flood. Say for example, landslide. All those natural disasters affected people are also food insecure because they have to migrate from their homes, they have to migrate from their hometowns, from the villages where they have lived due to the disaster, and they move to other places in search of work. So they lose everything, their employment, their house, they become poor. They beg sometimes, right? And these people are also food insecure. The other group of people who are food insecure are a large group of pregnant and nursing mothers and children under the age of 5 years. These are also food insecure people. Alright. Now, in India, if you look at its wide and vast region, there are some areas where people are most affected by food insecurity, while other areas the people do not suffer much from food insecurity. Okay. Now, some states have immense or big problem of food insecurity. Okay, because people living in those states suffer from food and nutrition insecurity. So let us look at which states these are. Okay, they are Uttar Pradesh, Bihar, Jharkhand, Orissa, West Bengal, Chhattisgarh, Madhya Pradesh and Maharashtra. These are the states where the people suffer from food insecurity. Alright. Now, we are saying that people suffer from food insecurity. How can we make sure that that their suffering is reduced? How can we help them? What does the government do? Okay, so now let us look at food security measures. What are measures that needs to be taken or that has been taken by the government or otherwise to make sure that people don't suffer from food insecurity, that people can access, afford and also have adequate amount of food grains. Okay, so there are some measures. Okay, first is by increasing the domestic production of food grains to meet the growing demand for food grains. So with the growing rate of population, with the growing numbers of people in our country, the demand also grows for food. The people keep on increasing in number. Now the food grain also has to increase in its production. Then only the people can get the food. Then only people can access the food, right? So what we need to do is we need to increase the production of food grain so that people can access it. Okay, we have to reduce the import of food grains. Okay, by reducing the import means getting the food grains from abroad, from the foreign countries. Okay, when you import, there is import duty, it becomes expensive. When it becomes expensive, people cannot afford it, people cannot pay for buying it. Okay, it's people's purchase power declines. Okay, now when we reduce the import of food grains from foreign countries, then it becomes easier for people because food grain does not become expensive. People can easily afford it. Okay, so these are some of the measures that we need to take to make sure that people are food secure. Now, here we will discuss some of the measures in details about food, about the prevention of food insecurity. Okay, the first one is by increasing food supplies. Now, how do we increase food supplies? There are certain measures. Okay, the first one is called institutional measure. In institutional measure, what can we do? Land reforms have to be implemented by setting up institutional credit agencies so that cheap and adequate agricultural finance or cheap and adequate loans are provided to the farmers, okay, for them to go on with their cultivation or agricultural endeavors or efforts. Okay, by setting up strong marketing structure to ensure fair price to farmers for their produce, by making sure that fair price is paid to the farmers for their produce. If you don't pay fair price, then that will not increase food supplies. The farmers will be discouraged. So these are the institutional measures for increasing the food supplies. Okay. The second one is technological improvements. Okay. How do we improve technology? By extension of irrigation facilities. Okay, so the irrigation facilities which help in the agriculture production, that needs to be extended, that needs to be expanded, that needs to be improved. Okay, Propagation of high yielding varieties of seeds, by making sure that high yielding seeds are distributed among the farmers for its cultivation, okay, so that the crop that they cultivate, they have high yields, okay. By supplying chemical fertilizers at subsidized prices. So farmers, when they cultivate, they use fertilizers for the proper cultivation, for the high yield, okay. During the harvest time, they have good harvest. So if we make sure that the fertilizers that they use are cheap, are subsidized, okay, the prices of those fertilizers are subsidized, then the farmers can afford to buy more and more fertilizers for the proper cultivation of the crops, okay. So by these measures, what we do, we improve the technology for the increase of food supplies, all right. The third is National Food Security Mission. Okay. Now this is a scheme which is centrally sponsored, which is encouraged support by the central government. It was launched between the years 2007 and 8. Okay. Now this was introduced to pursue a resolution of the National Development Council. The National Development Council came up with an aim, came up with an objective to make sure that the food was secure. Okay. So what did it come up with? It aimed to increase the production of rice, wheat and pulses by 10, 8 and 2 million tons respectively. Okay. So National Development Council aimed that by encouraging the farmers, by making sure that this scheme, National Food Security Mission scheme, is implemented, by making sure it is implemented, their aim was to increase the production of rice, wheat, pulses to great extent. Okay. And this scheme went on, this scheme was implemented until the end of the 11th 5-year plan period, which is between 2011 and 12. All right. Now it continued in the next in the 12th 5-year plan as well, but with new targets. Now this time it had new targeted crops. Earlier it was rice, wheat and pulses. Okay, the aim was to increase its production, rice, wheat and pulses, remember. But by the 12th 5-year plan, the new targeted crops were rice, wheat, pulses and coarse cereals. So they said if we increase the production of these crops, then what happens? We can get close to being food secure. We can get close to making sure that people were food secure. Okay. Now that leads on to another main important point. Until now we learned about food security, the people who are food insecure, and also we saw some of the measures adopted for food security. Now we'll learn about food management, right? Food needs to be managed so that people are food secure, so that we prevent food insecurity, insecurity, okay, nutrition insecurity among the people. Now food management has 3 basic objectives. The first one is procurement of food grains from farmers at remunerative prices. So the food management, what it does, first it procures food grains from the farmers. And how it procures? It buys from the farmers. But when it buys, when the government buys, it needs to make sure that the food grains are bought at fair prices. Okay. The second one, the food grains that are bought, those are distributed to the consumers, particularly the vulnerable sections of the society, at affordable prices. So first the government buys the food grains. Second, the food grains are distributed among the people, especially to those people who are vulnerable, okay, who are so poor and they cannot afford to buy the food grains from the market, okay. And third objective of food management is maintenance of food buffers, maintenance of storage of food in times of to be used in times of natural calamities, disasters and shortages. All right. So by maintaining that there is a storage of food, by maintaining the price stability of the food grains, okay, the food can be well managed. All right. Now there are a few instruments for food management. You can't just manage the food. You have to apply few instruments, few methods for proper management of food and for making sure that people do not suffer from food insecurity. The first one is minimum support price or MSP and central issue price. Okay. Now, the Food Corporation of India or FCI, it procures and distributes the food and it also stores the food. All right. Now, the food security system, it has two components. One is buffer stock and the other is public distribution system. So, this is a bit confusing. Let me tell you again. Let us go little back. We spoke about food management and we saw three main objectives of food management. And we said that in order to manage food, we need certain methods. And the methods are two. Okay. One is minimum support price, by maintaining minimum support price and by also maintaining central issue price. Okay. And the second one is by the procurement, distribution and storage of food grains by the Food Corporation of India. Now these two, very soon we are going to look at it in details. For now, just remember these two instruments. Now the food security system, it has two main components. Alright, one is buffer stock and the other is public distribution system, meaning in order for food security to be maintained, in order for food to be managed, these two components are very important. The first is buffer stock, which means basically maintaining the storage of the food, and the second one is distribution of the food to the public. Okay, so these two are important components. Now let us look at each of them. The first one, buffer stock. So basically buffer stock is the stock of food grains, storage of food grains, namely wheat and rice, and it's how it is stored. It is procured by the government through the Food Corporation of India. So the Food Corporation of India procures these food crops from the farmers and this is stored. Okay. The FCI purchases the surplus stock from the farmers. Now the farmers, when they cultivate certain crops, what do? They sell it to the market, right? Now there are some part of that crop which is surplus, which is extra, they keep it. Now that extra is bought by FCI, and after buying, the FCI stores it, reserves it. Okay. Now when FCI buys from the farmers, they are paid minimum support price. Okay, MSP. This price is paid by FCI to the farmers. Now minimum support price is announced by the government. Okay, and it is announced and fixed by the government. All right, and it is the price at which the government is ready to purchase the crop from the farmers directly. So there is no middle person. If the farmer produces or cultivates crops, that crop is bought by the government through FCI. When FCI buys the crop, they pay the farmers MSP, minimum support price. Now this MSP is announced and decided by the government. Alright. Now, the market price of the crop never comes down below MSP. Now, MSP is a price below which the price never drops. Okay. And this price, which is called MSP, minimum support price, it is announced on the basis of recommendations made by the Agriculture Costs and Prices Commission, ACPC. Now, MSP is not just any price, it's not a random price that the government fixes and announces, okay, for the farmers to be paid when FCI buys its surplus stock. That price is decided, that price is based on the recommendations made by a department which is called Agriculture Costs and Prices Commission. Okay, so the price is well thought of. All right. Now, the buffer stocks are maintained by the central government for three purposes. The storage of food grains. This is maintained by the central government, not the state government, for three purposes. What are these purposes? First, to distribute food grains in the deficit areas. So, when at times some areas lack or have food shortage, okay, they suffer from food shortage, then the government distributes the food grains to that area. Okay, and normally those areas are the areas where the poorest strata of society lives, where the poorest of the poor lives, and the food grains that is provided, they are provided at price lower than the market price, so that people can easily buy it, even the poor people can easily afford it. Okay. Now, the price at which the poorer people buy, the price which is lower than the market price, the price which is charged by the government when it distributes the food to the poor people, that price is called issue price. All right. Now, buffer stock is maintained for resolving the problem of food shortage. Okay, during adverse weather conditions or during the period of calamity. So when there is a disaster, when a region or a group of people suffer from natural disasters or calamity or famine or diseases, or when they have food shortages, then the government uses that crop, uses those food grains in buffer stock for the distribution to the people who suffer from food shortages. Okay, as a result of calamities. The third reason is to meet the prescribed minimum buffer stock norms for food security. So, according to food security, in order for a country to have its people who do not suffer from food insecurity, the government has to make sure that it has minimum buffer stock, so that in case of emergency, it can use that stock for distribution among the people. Okay, so buffer stocks are also maintained so that they have food ready for distribution in times of need, in times of emergency. Now, the second is called public distribution system. Okay, now we said that FCI buys food grains from the farmers and stocks it, which is called buffer stock, right? Now, FCI, after it stocks it, distributes the food through government regulated ration shops among the poorer section of the society. We said that the buffer stock, that from that the food grains are used for its distribution among the poorer people. That is done by FCI again. Okay, and how it is done? There are shops called ration shops. You must have heard about it. I'm very sure your parents every Saturday goes to the ration shops, or you call it ration shops, and from there you get food grains, kerosene and other products at very cheap price. Okay, so that is how the distribution of food grains from the buffer stock takes place. All right, so this whole process of how FCI distributes the food grains to the poorer section of the society through ration shops is called public distribution system, or PDS. Okay, ration shops are today present in most localities around the country. They're in villages, towns, and also in cities. Okay. There are over 4.7 lakh ration shops all across our country. These ration shops are also known as fair price shops. Okay. These shops have food grains, sugar and kerosene oil, which is required for cooking the food and for consumption. These food grains and kerosene oil, they are sold to people at lower price than the market price, which is called issue price, right? So that the poorer section of people can easily afford it. Now this system, PDS, public distribution system, has been in existence in our country for the last 6 decades. For the last 60 years, this has been in existence. Okay. So if you have a ration card, if you are a ration card holder, you can go to the ration shops and you can buy those food grains and oil. Okay. Now these ration cards are of 3 kinds. Okay. One is called Antyodaya cards. These are for the poorest of the poor. The second one is called BPL cards, or these are meant for people belonging to below poverty line. And the third one is called APL cards, and that APL cards are for the rest of the people. Okay. Now this PDS, this was revised to make the system more efficient and targeted among the most poorest and the needy people. Okay. In the year 1992, it was called Revamped Public Distribution System. Now, why all these revision of the schemes take place? We already know, we have done it a little while ago, that as the country undergoes process of development, economic growth, these schemes also have to be changing, shifting, okay, according to the needs of the people, because the needs keep changing. The concept of food security, the concept of all these ideas keep changing according to the present or current needs of the society. All right. Now, the revamped public distribution system, or the RPDS, this provided benefits to remote and backward areas. All right. From June 1997, the targeted public distribution system, which is again another revised scheme of the same old scheme, called TPDS, was introduced for poor in all areas, for the poor people in all areas. Okay. This scheme adopted something called dual price policy, two price policy for the poor and the non-poor. So earlier it was divided between who were very poor, below poverty line, APL, right? Now dual price policy was adopted by the scheme TPDS, okay, and that price was one for the poor and the other for the non-poor. All right. So separate prices were issued for BPL families and APL families. Okay. Earlier, same price was asked by the ration shops for the people purchasing the food grains from the ration shops. Now, separate prices were adopted. Now, if you have APL ration cards, you have to pay prices which is different than BPL ration card holders. Okay. Now, the BPL ration card holders would have to pay lower prices than that paid by the APL ration card holders. Okay. So, separate prices for separate group of people. Okay. BPL, APL. A special scheme called Antyodaya Anna Yojana was launched in December 2000. Okay. It identified 10 million poorest among the BPL families. Even among the BPL families, it identified 10 million people who are very poor and provided them with 25 kg of food grains per family per month at a very low price of rupees 2 per kg for wheat and rupees 3 per kg for for rice. All right. Now that brings us to another act, okay, called National Food Security Act. This act was implemented in the year 2013. This act is an act of the Parliament of India, and the main aim of this act is to provide subsidized food grains to approximately two-thirds of India's 1.2 billion people. Two-thirds. Okay, that's more than half of the population of India. Alright, this was enforced in September 2013. This act was enforced in 2013. Okay, and the person, whoever was eligible to access the facility provided by this National Food Security Act could now purchase 5 kg per month of food grains at subsidized prices, at prices lower than the market price. Now, there are certain features, characteristics of this act, okay, National Food Security Act. Let us look at them. 75% rural and 50% of the urban population, according to this act, were entitled for 3 years, okay, from enactment, that means from 2013 for 3 years, which means 2013, 2014 and 2015, okay, to avail 5 kg of food grains per month. So 75% people, 75% of the rural population could get 5 kg of food grains per month. 50% of the urban population could get 5 kg food grains per month for 3 years. The states are responsible for determining the eligibility. So according to this act, the state government was responsible for determining who was eligible to get 5 kg of food grains per month. Alright. Pregnant women and lactating mothers nursing their children, they were entitled to nutritious take-home ration of 600 calories and a maternity benefit of at least 6,000 rupees for 6 months. So these were also provisions which were made sure by the act. Children from 6 months to 14 years of age were to receive free hot meals or take-home rations. Okay, children were also given rations or hot meals. The central government would provide funds to the states in case of short supplies of food grains. If the state faced lack of supplies, food grains, then the central government would provide adequate fund to make sure that the supply of food grains in the states were going smoothly. The current food grains allocation of these states will be protected by the central government for at least 6 months. So the food grains allocation, the allocation of food grains for each state would be protected by the state government for 6 months. Okay. The state government will provide a food security allowance to the beneficiaries in case of non-supply of food grains. So the state government, who was responsible for making sure that the food grains were distributed among the people, if in case of non-supply of food grains, then the state governments were responsible for the provision of food security allowance, okay, to the people. The next one, the public distribution system is to be reformed. So this act had to be reformed. If certain changes need to be made, then it could be made. Okay. The act states that eldest woman in the household, 18 years or above, is the head of the household for the issuance of the ration card. Okay. So if you are oldest girl child and 18 years or above, then you could issue the ration card. There will be state and district level redress mechanisms. So if there were problems regarding the distribution of food, unavailability of food despite being eligible for the excess of food grains, then you could go with your problem. You could seek solution at various state and district level offices. Okay. State food commissions will be formed for implementation and monitoring of the provisions of the Act. So the state government would form state food commissions so that it will look after the implementation of the provisions made possible by the Act, and also its monitoring, also making sure that it was properly working, smoothly working, and provisions were made available for the people. Okay. The cost of the implementation is estimated to be 1.25 lakh crore, approximately 1.5% of the GDP. So the amount required for making sure that the provisions were implemented, the provisions were given for access to the people, okay, the poor people, the amount needed was fixed at or estimated, okay, supposed at 1.25 lakh crore. The poorest of the poor people who were covered under Antodaya Yojana will remain entitled to 35 kg of grains. So people who were covered under this scheme, Antodaya Yojana, they would be entitled, they were allowed to take or have 35 kg of grains per month. Okay. So that was the salient features of the National Food Security Act. Now let us look at the source of food grains. Okay. Now when we look at India, India is an agricultural country. Agriculture is one of the main occupation of the people here, right? So we have huge production of food grains, all right, but that production also sometimes suffers. There are various factors. Okay, food grains come from agriculture. Okay, if you don't have agriculture, food grains will not be produced. There will be no production of food grains. So agriculture is the source of food grains. Okay. Food grains production in India increased almost 4 times in the last 50 years. So if you look at the last 50 years, we can see that it has increased, the production has increased over the years. Okay. But despite that increase, we say that food grains production has been increasing in the last 50 years. But still we find large number of people who are food insecure, who are nutrition insecure, who are very poor and cannot even afford to purchase food grains. Okay. So they cannot even buy themselves 2 decent meals per day. Okay. Now, why has this happened? Why do we have this problem even with the growth of production? Okay, it's because of the gradual shift from the production of food crops towards the cultivation of crops used in industries, food, like fruits, oilseeds, etc. Because over the years, what we have seen is now the farmers produce less of food grains that we consume directly, then cultivating more food grains which are used for industrial production, like oils, like fruits, etc. Okay. So with that, the area which were earlier used for sowing food crops like wheat, rice, that has decreased. Okay, with that there has been decline in the food production. All right, and there are other reasons as well. So with the growth of population, the number of people are rising and the rate of growth of population in India is very high. With that, there is demand for housing facilities for the people. And when that has to be met, what is done, more and more of land is being used to build houses, apartments. Okay. So that means the agricultural land which was earlier used for cultivation, that is now being encroached upon, used for building houses, complexes, housing complexes, apartments. Okay. The food and nutritional security of India at the moment currently depends to a great extent on the production of wheat and rice. If there is slight decline in the production of wheat and rice in India, then the food and nutritional security of India may suffer. But if the production of wheat and rice is higher and increasing, then the food and nutritional security of India can fare smoothly. Okay, so what we are trying to understand is that the food security in our country depends heavily on the production of crops like rice and wheat. Okay, for the 5 consecutive years which followed, okay, from 2004, 2005 to 2008, 2009, the the production of food grains increased, but it declined in 2009, 2010 due to severe drought conditions. Okay, again in the subsequent years of 2010, 2011, due to again normal monsoon, the country reached a significantly higher level of food grains production. So it improved in its production. Okay, so what we can see is that in the food production, the area, the source of food grains, which is cultivation, it sometimes suffer from various factors, weather conditions. So when it suffers from weather conditions, from calamities, then the production of food slacks or decreases. And when the monsoon is on time, when there is proper irrigation facilities, then we have proper yield or higher yield. Okay, good harvest, increase in the food grain production. So the source of food grain, the cultivation, okay, the cultivation of crops, it varies from time to time. Okay, so we have to make sure, the government has to make sure that it is ready to face the challenges at times like this, where there is an increase in the food grains and where there is a decrease in the production of the food grains. Okay, that is why it is important, because agriculture is the source of food grains, the source for food grains, and food grains the production of food grains are very important, very vital for the food security, for the nutrition security, for preventing food insecurities among the poorest of the poor people. Okay, that is why it is very important for the government of our country or any countries in the world to develop certain techniques, okay, to devise programs, to devise schemes, to form certain ideas, policies, to fight and prepare itself for these situations. Okay, green revolution is one of the techniques that our government has devised, has formulated, so that it encourages and improves the development of agricultural sector. Because if you develop agricultural sector, then there is production of food grains. With the production of food grains, it can be accessed and distributed to the people, not only to any people, especially to the poorest of the poor people, who are the most food insecure groups in our society. Okay, so with that we have come to the end of this long topic. Okay,